Hi, my name is Brian Markman. I'm Director of Education at SAE Institute in Los Angeles. Today we're going to talk about house, more specifically, making house in Logic Pro X. Today we're going to take advantage of one of the new features of Logic Pro X, one of my favorites, and that's the MIDI effects. This is a feature that should look familiar to those of you that are already Ableton users. Now it's available in Logic. If you don't play an instrument, this will open many doors for you. And if you do play, this will simplify your workflow, maybe even change the way you think of writing music. Let's take a look. So as you can see, in this session here, I've already got a couple tracks. I've got a drums track. Real simple. It's just the Ultra Beat using this Paris House Remix Kit. Just wrote a simple pattern there. Then I've got an EXS24 sampler, and I'm using one of the old patches, FM Pulse Bass, which you can download by just downloading the additional content. It sounds like this. I'm partial to 90s house, so I kind of went in that direction for today's example. Should be pretty easy though for you to follow along with what I'm doing. Didn't do anything too crazy. So just to kind of be clear, we're not going to talk about too much music theory stuff in depth. Just going to really graze the surface of the thing and really use the MIDI effects to do the heavy lifting for us. So to do that, I've got a piano down here. Real simple grand piano patch in EXS24. And what I want to do is take advantage of the MIDI effects to make chords for me. So let's assume we don't know how to play at all, and we kind of just know what sounds good to us. So first thing I'm going to do is, if I look over at the channel strips over here, I've got a pretty similar setup to what we've had in the past, with the exception of a couple new slots here. And the one towards the top here that says MIDI effects is what we're interested in. If I click on it, you'll notice I've got a bunch of choices: arpeggiator, chord trigger, modifier, modulator, and these vary. Some of them are designed specifically to change everything that you do in your performance. Other times they're made to augment your performance. So what happens is you play, and then it dynamically affects things like if your velocity goes above a certain amount, it will push it down, kind of like a compressor. Designed to sort of make your performances happen in a controlled situation, kind of like what we would do with audio. In this particular case, we're going to use what's called the chord trigger. When I bring it up, you'll see this chord trigger, which is representing sort of two things. The top keyboard is our input, and it represents what note I play, and the bottom, the output, is representing what the chord trigger is actually making for us. Now you'll notice that there are these two big buttons at the top, single and multi. Single means that any note that I hit on the keyboard is going to trigger an entire group of notes or a chord to be made for you. Multi, you'll notice, will get rid of most of that blue, and it will break up your keyboard into zones. These zones now can either have one chord per each individual key, or you can make zones. So if you knew what you were doing and you wanted to do a major area, a minor area, and then you wanted to make specific chords, you could build this right into the layout of your keyboard, and then it would make it easy for you to jump around in a song and shift from majors to minors without knowing anything. We're going to make it easy. We're going to go back to single. And if we look here at the top where our presets live, if we look down at the bottom, we have choices for both the multis and the singles. I'm going to go into the singles, and I'm going to go into triads. Now if we look, we have a lot of choices in all of these different categories, but triads is going to be sort of a simple one for me. Now I have the options here of kind of our traditional augmented, diminished, majors, minors, and again, this is stuff you can Google for your music theory kind of fix. I'm going to grab minor, which is, if we had to think of it in really simple terms, majors are sort of happy, and minors are, some say sad, others would say more thoughtful. For our purposes, we're going to say thoughtful, because you'll hear it still sounds upbeat, just as a little bit of a different kind of vibe. So when I play it, it sounds like something we're kind of comfortable with a lot of house records that we've listened to a bunch of times. Now, rather than reinvent the wheel and try to figure out, well, what am I doing? I'm not a musician. Okay, I've got this bass line. Now you can take bass lines from anywhere. This one I played myself, but again, like, I could have used an Apple loop, or I could have listened to someone else's performance and played along, you know, figuring out the notes. So if you look at it here, you'll notice that we can look at the piano roll and determine what specifically is playing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to this and play it. right? So we could tell looking at it that the lowest note or the root note is D. Okay, that's going to help us with the chords, because that's what I'm going to use when I play my individual notes. I'm just going to play a D and see how that sounds. So if I go ahead and play along with this, and I'll solo those two tracks together, just the bass and my piano. Now I had a pretty strong sense that this would sound all right. And I'm just going to play these three chords over and over and over again, but because it's a simple passage anyway, it should sound pretty good, right? So first thing I'm going to do is just drop this into record. Whoops, let me do that again, and let me make sure that my metronome is on. Cool, now we got it. Now let's listen back to that. So overall, not bad. That last little note that comes in really, really late, I may move it a little bit earlier. If I hold down Option and I use my arrow keys, I can nudge it. Cool. And then I'm going to hit Command-A to select all the notes and just quantize them real quick to tighten them down. Let's hear that again. Okay, and same thing. I like this one a little bit closer together. Again, Option and the arrows just to nudge. So maybe I'll clean that up a little. Okay, and in this particular case, there can be a rhyme or reason to this. I'm just sort of doing it by feel. Okay, cool. Not bad. All right, so now that I've got a performance, such as it is, I'm going to go through and take this little region that I created. I'm going to hit Command-R, which allows me to repeat it quickly. And I'm just going to stick it, so now I've got two of these. So now I'm going to look at the little art part that you'll notice that I already made a track with it, and it's got an EXS24 on it. And if I mute the effects, it sounds like this. Little plucky sound, not bad. So gave it a compressor to make it kind of sit. And then I also added a delay so that it gives it a little bit of texture, because what we're going to do is take advantage of the chord trigger like we did a minute ago. So it will follow the same chords that we had in the piano part, but we're also going to use an arpeggiator. And that's going to make a little floaty melody that's going to sit on top to complement our piano part, right? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take both of these piano parts I did and Option drag them down, right? So now I've got the exact identical performance. If we listen to it, obviously, because the length of the notes is different, it's going to sound different, even though it's playing the same exact notes. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go into our MIDI effects and we're going to start to embellish a little bit. So first thing we'll do is we'll grab a chord trigger, and actually let's do this from the mixer. right? So now, and that was just Command 2, or you can go Window, Mixer, or if you hit X, you can bring it up from the bottom of the screen. 3 different ways you can do this, right? I'm going to take this chord trigger, and if I just hold down Option, I can drag it over to another instrument. So now when I play it, it's a different kind of a sound. But I don't want to compete where I'm stacking. What I'd like to do is break it up and make it sound interesting. So I'm going to go over here, and if I hover just below where the chord trigger is, it lights up a little line which indicates that I can add more. So I'm going to go and add an arpeggiator. Right? Now this arpeggiator, if you've never used one before, is really simple. As soon as you begin to play back, it moves forward like a step sequencer, working through each of the individual notes in your chord, but then playing them one by one. This is what gives us that interesting arpeggiated sound that we're used to in things like trance. Now, rather than play the traditional way, which is cool but a little different kind of vibe, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slow it down. All our arpeggiators have a rate. The other thing is I don't want it to play exactly in sequence the way that you would expect it to, if we were playing it just traditionally up, down, or whatever, where it's just going to play at a certain speed each individual note. If we look at the bottom left, it says live, which indicates that it'll just take this input of eighth notes and this little pattern and play it straight. And I'm going to go grid. This will turn on this little grid at the bottom. I'm going to stretch it out so that I've got eight different steps here. And then I'm going to sort of turn on some of these that will create a little bit of an interesting variation to what I'm doing with my performance. Now when I play it, and if I go through the different variations, I can kind of come up with, including things like random. But I'm going to use one of these so it's a little more predictable, the up, the down, up, right? So now when I listen to the performance by itself, right, it gives me a nice little variation. Now when I drop the piano back on top of it, you'll hear what I mean. So there it gives you an example of how powerful something simple like MIDI effects inside a Logic Pro X can be. So if you play a lot, this will kind of open up some really interesting new avenues for you. And if you don't play at all, now you'll start hearing your musical ideas really blossom into something that sounds much more fully formed, because the chords will do a lot of the heavy lifting of trying to get the melody under control and sound complex enough. I also welcome you to sort of play around with the other MIDI effects, because there's a lot of cool things they can do. And in some of our other lessons, we'll get into how they work and some of the flexibility and functionality that they have. I'm Brian Markman from SAE Institute in Los Angeles. Thanks a lot for checking it out. Come back and we'll do some more.